Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tuning the time machine to a remarkably specific and, frankly, kind of chaotic moment in music history.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at a song that you definitely know, or at least you know the nursery rhyme that birthed it. But the story behind how it became a hit is, well, it's wilder than you'd expect. We are talking about Don't Let the Rain Come Down, also known as Crooked Little Man.
It is such a fascinating track to dig into because, on the surface, it feels like this breezy, just a catchy folk pop tune.
Right.
But when we really look at the source material, this song is actually a perfect storm of copyright confusion, logistical nightmares involving these massive vocal groups, and a genre mashup that, by all rights, really shouldn't have worked at all.
But it did work, and I guess that's our mission for today's deep dive. We need to figure out exactly how a song based on an old English nursery rhyme managed to become a chart-topping smash hit right in the middle of, frankly, the most hostile environment imaginable for folk music.
Hostile is definitely the right word for it. We really have to set the scene here for you. The date we're looking at is February 1964.
Ground zero.
Exactly, ground zero. If you follow music history at all, February 1964 is when the Beatles arrived in America.
Yep.
They appear on Ed Sullivan, and suddenly the entire culture just pivots.
The British invasion.
Right. The airwaves are instantly dominated by electric guitars, mop tops, screaming teenagers. Rock and roll is completely rewriting the rule book overnight.
Right. Everyone is just losing their minds over, I want to hold your hand. And then in walks this group, the Serendipity Singers, with a song that isn't rock and roll.
Not at all.
It doesn't have electric guitars. It's this weird blend of traditional folk and calypso.
It is a massive anomaly.
Yeah.
It's this folk calypso hybrid based on a nursery rhyme, and it's climbing the charts while Lennon and McCartney are essentially strangling the life out of any competition.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It really speaks to how diverse the music scene actually was in 1964, even if, our collective memory just tends to focus strictly on the British invasion.
So let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the source material of the song itself. Because the lyrics aren't new, I think most people listening probably heard this rhyme before they could even walk.
Yes, the foundational text, so to speak, is the traditional English nursery rhyme. There was a crooked man.
Right.
You know the one. He walked a crooked mile, he found a crooked sixpence, bought a crooked cat.
It's classic stuff, very Mother Goose.
Yeah.
But here is where we need to get into the weeds of how folk music actually operates as a business. Because usually with these really old rhymes, they're considered public domain, right?
Generally speaking, yes. If a song or a rhyme is hundreds of years old, nobody owns it.
Because the author is long gone.
Exactly. The author is dead or entirely unknown. You can record it, I can record it, and we don't owe royalties to anyone. The credit on the record label usually just says traditional.
Okay, but the version we're talking about today, the one that hit the charts in the 60s, it didn't just spontaneously appear out of the ether. Our sources point to a bit of a prequel in 1960.
That's right. If we track the genealogy of this specific musical adaptation, we have to go back 4 years prior to the big hit. A singer named Jimmie Rodgers recorded a version of this.
And just to clarify for everyone, this is the pop singer Jimmie Rodgers, not the legendary country yodeler from the 1920s.
Right. The 1960s pop singer.
Yeah.
So he recorded it, but, and this is important, he released it on his album At Home with Jimmie Rodgers, an evening of folk songs, but he didn't call it Don't Let the Rain Come Down.
What did he call it?
He titled it Crooked Little House.
Crooked Little House.
Oh.
Okay. Now, looking at the historical records for that 1960 album, this is where the legal plot starts to thicken. The liner notes don't say traditional.
They do not. They list two very specific songwriters,
Yeah.
Ersel Hickey and Ed E. Miller.
Okay, wait. Why is that significant? If it's a centuries-old nursery rhyme, how can Hickey and Miller just claim that they wrote it?
This is a really key insight into the music business, especially during that folk revival era. You can't copyright the lyrics of There Was a Crooked Man. Those belong to history. But you can copyright a specific musical arrangement, or a new melody, or modified structure. What Hickey and Miller did was they took the raw clay of the nursery rhyme and they sculpted it into a modern verse-chorus pop structure.
Oh, I see.
They're the ones who added that infectious "Don't Let the Rain Come Down" hook.
Ah, so they essentially built the house even if they didn't manufacture the bricks themselves.
Precisely. In legal terms, they created a derivative work, and that gave them a completely valid copyright claim over that specific version of the song.
Which brings us to 1964. The Serendipity Singers released their version, which, as we know, becomes the massive hit. You would assume Hickey and Miller were thrilled, just sitting back and watching those fat royalty checks roll in.
You would definitely assume that.
Mm.
But this is where it gets messy. When the Serendipity Singers released their version, those names, Hickey and Miller, were largely absent from the initial labeling.
You're kidding, really?
Yeah, the initial pressings often credited the song as traditional, or in some cases, they credited the adaptation to the Serendipity Singers' own musical director. It is a classic example of just how murky folk music copyrights were in the early 60s. There was this prevailing attitude in the industry of, oh, it's a folk song, it belongs to the people, nobody owns it.
That feels like a massive oversight. I mean, imagine you're Hickey or Miller, you're driving in your car, you turn on the radio, and you hear your specific melody, your specific original hook being sung by this huge group, and the DJ comes on and says it's an old traditional tune.
It must have been infuriating for them. And obviously, it was legally actionable. It was eventually rectified, thankfully.
Okay.
Later reissues of the Serendipity Singers recording did correct the credits. They finally listed Ersel, Hickey, and Eddie Miller as the writers. But for a very distinct, very lucrative window of time, the biggest folk hit in the country was essentially sailing under a false flag regarding its authorship.
Justice for Hickey and Miller. I'm glad they got their names back on there eventually. It really just goes to show that even in the whole peace and love, communal folk era, the music business was still very much a business.
Absolutely. The music industry has never been a charity, no matter what genre we're talking about.
Very true. Okay, so we have the song's origin and the copyright drama.
Right.
Now let's talk about the vehicle that actually carried the song up the charts, the Serendipity Singers themselves.
A truly fascinating group. And calling them a group might actually be an understatement.
Yeah, I'm looking at the notes here. There were 9 members.
9 members.
That is not a band. That is a baseball team. That's a jury minus the alternates.
It practically is a small village, and you really have to try to imagine the logistics of that. In the modern era, you know, we're so used to this solo pop star or maybe a 4-piece rock band.
Right.
The idea of a 9-person folk group trying to get radio play, trying to organize tours, trying to just physically fit on a stage together, it's wild to think about.
Honestly, how do you fit 9 people on a stage? Or even worse, in a 1960s recording booth? It feels like it would just be absolute chaos. Like, who is in charge of ordering lunch for 9 lead singers?
It's a logistical nightmare, surely. But they actually had a very specific, very disciplined way of handling the performance aspect, especially for their live shows and their TV appearances.
How so?
Well, there's this great video from a special called My Music Folk Rewind that captures their stage choreography. They didn't just walk out and stand in disorganized clump around a couple of microphones.
Okay, paint the picture for us. How do you organize 9 acoustic folk singers without them constantly bumping into each other's guitars?
They organized themselves into a matrix, specifically 3 groups of 3.
A matrix of folk singers? That sounds very mathematical.
It was highly structured. Visually, you have these 3 distinct trios standing together. And the arrangement of the song actually leaned right into that visual structure.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Each subgroup of 3 would sing a specific verse. So you'd have Trio A take the first verse, Trio B take the second, Trio C takes the third, and so on.
Oh, that's clever. So you get these different vocal textures for each verse. It keeps the listener's ear interested because the actual tone of the vocals changes every 30 seconds or so.
Exactly. It completely prevents listener fatigue. And then, for the chorus, that massive "Don't Let the Rain Come Down" hook, all 9 members would join in together.
That must have been just a massive wall of sound.
It creates this huge, incredibly powerful communal vibe, a real sing-along energy. And we have to remember the context here. This is right at the tail end of the hootenanny era in American culture.
The hootenanny era. Let's break that down for someone who might not know the term, because honestly, it sounds like a cartoon character.
Fair enough. So just prior to the Beatles changing everything, there was a very popular television show called Hootenanny.
Okay.
And the vibe of this show and the subculture it represented was very collegiate, very clean-cut. It was all about these big groups singing together, lots of audience participation, acoustic guitars, matching sweaters.
Right, not the gritty Greenwich Village scene.
Exactly. It wasn't about the brooding, poetic solo artist sitting in a dark corner cafe. It was about volume and harmony and smiling. The Serendipity Singers were perfectly engineered for that specific hootenanny aesthetic.
So they are maximizing that power in numbers approach. It's almost like a choir, but cooler.
A choir in turtlenecks, essentially.
But they did something else, too. We touched on it briefly in the intro, but this wasn't just a straight standard folk song like Michael rowed the boat ashore. They did something to the underlying rhythm that really set it apart from their peers.
They did. And this is where we have to give a lot of credit to the group's musical director, Bob Bowers.
Bob Bowers.
Right. He is the one credited with the arrangement of the hit single. He took this basic folk concept and gave it a calypso music-based adaptation.
Calypso. Now, when I think of calypso in the context of the early 60s, I immediately think of Harry Belafonte. Deo, the Banana Boat song.
And he is the gold standard for that era.
Yeah.
But mixing that Caribbean syncopated rhythm with a traditional English nursery rhyme about a crooked man, that is a phenomenally bold, creative choice.
Can you explain syncopated for us? What actually makes it sound calypso compared to just a standard folk guy strumming a guitar?
Sure. In a standard march or a very simple folk song, the emphasis is usually on the 1 and the 3 beats. It's very rigid, very predictable, down, up, down, up.
Like a metronome.
Right. Calypso shifts that emphasis. It deliberately puts the accent on the offbeats. It gives the music a sway, a highly danceable quality. It makes you want to move your hips, not just tap your foot.
So Bob Bowers takes There Was a Crooked Man, which historically is recited in this very stiff, almost marching meter, and he forces it into this swaying, relaxed Caribbean beat.
Exactly. And along with group members Brian Sennett and John Madden, who are also specifically noted in the historical records in the context of the recording and arrangement, they managed to make it work seamlessly.
Wait, hold on a second. John Madden.
I knew you were going to stop at that name.
I have to ask, are we talking about the legendary football coach, the video game icon?
We are not.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Right.
Because I was picturing the guy with the telestrator drawing yellow lines over the sheet music. Boom, tough singing. You got to hit the high note right here.
That would be an amazing piece of history, but no, this is a different John Madden entirely.
Okay.
But yes, this creative team forged a sound that was completely distinct.
Yeah.
It wasn't pure traditional folk like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and it certainly wasn't pure authentic calypso. It was this highly polished, pop-friendly fusion.
And they released this very polished fusion on Philips Records.
That's right. It came out on the Philips label. The B-side was a track called Freedom Star.
Yeah.
And here's a crucial detail. This single was actually the debut recording for the group. It was on their premiere album, conveniently titled The Serendipity Singers.
That is a heck of a debut to come right out of the gate with a genre-bending 9-voice hit. And we keep coming back to the date, but it is just so incredibly significant. Released in February 1964.
It really is the context that makes this chart story so special. I cannot stress enough how much the Beatles sucked the oxygen out of the room in February 1964.
I was actually reading about the Billboard charts from that specific window of time. At one point in early '64, the Beatles famously held the top 5 spots on the Billboard chart simultaneously.
It was an absolute monopoly. They were an unstoppable cultural force. So, for a debut folk group singing a nursery rhyme with acoustic instruments, to break through that impenetrable wall of noise, it's a huge testament to how undeniable that hook was.
So let's look at the actual numbers, because breaking through is probably an understatement. This thing wasn't just a minor blip on the radar.
Not at all. It was a legitimate smash. In the United States, it reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Number 6. Top 10. In the era of the Beatles. That is incredible.
It is. And if you look at the adult contemporary chart, it went even higher. It hit number 2.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The teenagers are all screaming for Ringo and Paul, but the parents are probably finding the Beatles a bit loud, maybe a bit scary.
Exactly. The Serendipity Singers offered a safe harbor for adult listeners. It was upbeat, it was melodic, you could clearly understand every single word of the lyrics. It appealed to that slightly older demographic that just wasn't quite ready to grow their hair out yet.
But what's even more interesting to me, looking at the sources, is the regional breakdown. Because back then, radio was a lot more fragmented than it is today. You had local surveys and local DJs that held massive influence.
Oh, absolutely. The national Billboard chart isn't average, but the local charts tell the real story of what people were actually requesting on the phone lines in their hometowns. And in some major markets, this song wasn't just top 10, it was number 1.
Where are we talking? What markets?
One of the biggest was the WLS Silver Dollar Survey.
WLS, that's the big powerhouse AM station in Chicago, right?
Huge station. If you made it to the top of WLS, you basically owned the entire Midwest. They had a massive 50,000-watt clear channel signal that you could pick up 3 states away at night.
Wow.
And on that WLS survey, Don't Let the Rain Come Down hit #1 on April 17th, 1964.
#1 in Chicago. Take that, Lennon and McCartney.
It didn't stop there. It also topped the local surveys in Louisville, Minneapolis, and Pittsburgh. So it had this incredibly broad appeal across the Midwest and the industrial North. It really resonated with working-class folks in those cities.
And it wasn't just contained to the U.S. borders either. The Crooked Little Man went international.
He certainly traveled. The single reached #7 on the CHM hit parade in Canada. And it went all the way across the globe to New Zealand, where it hit #6 on the Lever Hit Parade.
That is massive reach for a debut single about a crooked house. It really proves that a good melody is a good melody, regardless of where you are in the world.
And regardless of genre, too. And that brings us to the lasting legacy of the song. Because once a song hits that level of absolute ubiquity, other artists start eyeing it. It becomes part of the standard repertoire.
The covers. Who else decided to take a crack at the Crooked Little Man?
Well, keeping with the whole folk revival theme, the Brothers Four covered it. They put it on their album More Big Folk Hits.
Which makes sense. That's right in their wheelhouse. There were direct competitors, essentially.
Exactly. It's like Coke and Pepsi. If one has a hit flavor, the other's going to release their own version of it. But then you also have Trini Lopez.
Trini Lopez, the guy who did If I Had a Hammer.
Right. He included it on his record, The Folk Album, which came out in 1965. And Trini Lopez is such an interesting figure to bring up here because he already straddled that line between folk and Latin pop. He was famous for playing at PJ's in Hollywood, doing these incredibly high-energy go-go sets.
So for him, the calypso element of the song was probably the main selling point.
100%. He could lean into that syncopated rhythm even harder than the Serendipity Singers did. It was just a perfect natural fit for his performance style.
It really does seem like a song that can shapeshift. It can be traditional folk, it can be pop, it can be calypso, it can be Latin-infused.
That fluidity is the key to its survival. A very rigid song usually doesn't survive interpretation well. But a simple, highly structural song like this one allows the next artist to project their own unique style right onto it.
Yeah.
And we really can't forget the UK in all of this. While the Serendipity Singers were dealing with the British invasion over here, the song actually invaded Britain in return.
Did the Serendipity Singers hit the charts over there?
Actually, no, they didn't. In the UK, the hit version of the song was by a guy named Ronnie Hilton. His version peaked at #21 on the UK charts in 1964.
So Ronnie Hilton carried the torch across the Atlantic. It's funny how that happens in music history. Different artists completely capturing different geographic territories with the exact same song. It reminds me of how sometimes a movie is released with a completely different title or poster in different countries just to suit the local taste.
It's the exact same principle. The UK audience already knew Ronnie Hilton. He was a familiar voice. They didn't know this massive 9-piece American college group.
Right.
So Hilton's cover becomes the definitive version for them. But whether it's Ronnie Hilton, the Brothers Four, Trini Lopez, or the Serendipity Singers, that core, repetitive hook of Don't Let the Rain Come Down is what drives the whole thing.
It really does just stick in your brain. I've honestly been tapping my foot under the desk this whole time just thinking about the chorus.
It's a total earworm. It's scientifically designed to be.
So let's bring this all together. We start with a simple nursery rhyme that's been around for centuries. There was a crooked man.
Right, just an oral tradition passed down from parent to child.
Then in 1960, Jimmie Rodgers records it as Crooked Little House, and Hickey and Miller do the heavy lifting on the songwriting adaptation, turning a simple rhyme into a robust pop song structure.
Laying the legal and musical groundwork for what was to come.
Then, February 1964 hits. The Serendipity Singers, all 9 of them, team up with their musical director, Bob Bowers. They speed it up, they throw in a syncopated calypso beat, and they organize themselves into a highly choreographed vocal matrix.
It really was a perfect storm of arrangement and timing.
And despite the critic confusion early on, Hickey and Miller eventually get their due. The song travels the world, hits #1 in major markets like Chicago and Pittsburgh, and miraculously holds its own against the juggernaut of the Beatles.
It is a classic, unlikely success story. But I think the real key takeaway here, for me at least, is the absolute power of arrangement.
How so? Dig into that a bit more for us.
Well, just think about the actual lyrics. The cat has a kitten, the kitten has a mouse. They all live together in a little crooked house. It's nonsense. It's imagery written for toddlers. On paper, if you walked in and pitched those lyrics to a record executive today, they would laugh you right out of the room.
I have a hit song about a crooked cat. Yeah, I don't see that meeting going very well. They just yell next.
Exactly. But Bob Bowers and the group, they completely changed the delivery. They took something old and dusty, gave it a rhythm that fundamentally made people want to dance, and they used those 9 distinct voices to create a sense of power and excitement. They proved that you can reinvent a completely traditional concept just by changing the sonic wrapper it comes in.
It's not just what you say, it's how you sing it. And I guess how many people you have singing it with you.
Exactly. They turned a solo, spoken rhyme into a massive community event. And in 1964, even with the Beatles changing the entire cultural landscape, people still clearly wanted that sense of community.
You know, it leaves me with a thought to pass on to everyone listening. We don't really see this anymore in music. The idea of a 9-person vocal group having a mainstream top 10 pop hit.
It is incredibly rare these days. I mean, you have K-pop groups, which are certainly large and highly choreographed, but in the Western folk or pop tradition, it's almost extinct.
And also, just the source material itself. We talk all the time about sampling in modern hip-hop, which is usually taking an audio piece of an old record. But this is sampling a piece of historical culture. Can you imagine a modern pop star taking Humpty Dumpty or Jack and Jill, putting a heavy trap beat behind it, and going straight to #1 on Billboard?
You know what? We've seen stranger things happen on the internet. We've seen 19th century sea shanties go completely viral on TikTok. Maybe public domain nursery rhymes are the next big frontier for pop music.
Here you go. The next big trend. Little Miss Muffet featuring Drake. You heard it here first on the Deep Dive.
I will definitely keep an eye on the charts. If it happens, we'll have to do another deep dive on it.
Absolutely, we will. Well, that is all the time we have for today. We hope you enjoyed this look back at the crooked little man and his very unexpected journey to pop stardom.
It was a real pleasure to revisit.
Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.